So we up? Okay. So I already prayed, in case you didn't hear that. Things weren't working too well. So just a little bit of an update on what's been going on here, or with me. Last week I spoke in California. You can get the Sunday evening talk I did with Tom Hughes at hopeforourtimes.com, on their app, on their YouTube channel, and hopeforourtimes.com. And then Monday, it was Tuesday, Bill Salas, Tom Hughes, and I did a little talk on some of the things going on in the Middle East. Same place, you can get that at hopeforourtimes.com, Hope for Our Times app, Hope for Our Times YouTube channel. I also spoke at a conference last week with Brandon Holthouse and some other guys, Bill Salas, Bill Koenig. I think Billy Crone was there. I think I saw him. And Alex Newman, Patrick Wood. And you can, I think that's a $10 purchase to get those videos at tipofthespear.org. And then a week from Saturday, I will be at the Go Therefore conference over in Brookville, Ohio. Mike Spalding, Patrick Wood, Barry Stagner, and I think a couple other guys who I don't remember off the top of my head. And then 2 weeks from today, Patrick Wood will be here Sunday delivering the morning message, and we'll probably do a little something together during the Prophecy Update's second hour. Also have some interviews I'm trying to schedule, so just pray that those come together. There's a lot of things going on. I was woken up and so this is, I used this as a slide in my California talk. This is sort of how my brain is working as I'm looking through things in Bible prophecy and trying to make sense of them. And this is the basic formula that I use. It's not quite this complicated. It's more like this: acceleration, convergence, logistics, and understanding. And I think that, and so I sort of look at everything that I see going on through that grid. Are things accelerating? Are things converging that are talked about in Bible prophecy? What are the logistics? What does it take for Mystery Babylon to come together to fit the description that we see in Revelations 17 and 18 for the final world religion and this final world government beast system that's going to be in place? And then we look a lot at Revelation 13 and the mark of the beast system, and what's the technology that's going to be. Patrick Wood, who will be here in a couple weeks, he made a very good observation, probably, I think it was earlier this year. He said, listen, when this thing comes together, when the abomination of desolation takes place that we read about in Matthew chapter 24, and that leads to the implementation of this one world economic system, the mark of the beast, Patrick made a very good observation. This is not going to come, they're not going to do the abomination of desolation, and then the false prophet and Antichrist sit down and say, okay, how can we crowdfund a mark of the beast system, and how long will that take to develop? It's going to be well in place, and things will be accelerating very quickly. And then again, this is my view on how the first four horses, the horsemen, ride forth. By the way, just so it's clear, I'm not of the school that thinks that the first horse is the Antichrist. I think this is all sort of a creation of the beast system that takes place. But look, this is a very controversial topic. People argue about it all the time. So let's look at some of the things that are going on that I think you should be paying attention to over the next couple of weeks. And where does that? Okay, now this is kind of interesting. This is a video, and I don't know if it has sound. If it does, I'm going to turn it down. Okay, so what this is in China this past week, and what they decided to do, let's set the record for the most simultaneous drones doing something at one time. And so they took 8,100 drones, had them all hooked together through a system to generate this kind of graphic. These are drones, by the way. This is looking in the sky at the drones. And so that was a record. By the way, a few months ago, they set the record. I think it was 1,400 drones acting simultaneously. So in just a few months, they went from 1,400 to 8,100. I'm sure that this will go much more quickly. Isn't that pretty amazing as to what they're able to do? And I noticed this myself a few years ago when Israel was doing its 70th anniversary. Back in 2018, they had a drone array go up, and it went from a 70 to the Star of David that's on the Israeli flag. And at that time, I did say that this would have a military application at some point. And that's what's true here. This does have a military application. Here's another little video that sort of talks about what's happening. So whatever you see that's done to ooh and awe people is going to be done with a military application. In fact, in some respects, it's already happening. But what happens when they have a system like this where they can send up 10,000 drones, and the drones can start to attack targets in a country like Hezbollah sending this to Israel, or vice versa? What will that do to the defense systems that they have? So this is going to be a fairly big deal. And so Israel, by the way, this is Israel's system. This is called their Iron Beam. There were some reports this week. This is a laser system. The problem with Iron Dome, which is a missile system, it takes a missile and it fires a missile at an incoming drone or other missile. The problem with that is only one missile can hit one missile. And each missile costs, usually they have to fire two to get one hit. And that's $50,000 per missile. So that means that anytime there's a drone or something coming in, a rocket, it costs $100,000 for Israel to shoot that missile or drone down. That quickly adds up. And again, what happens if you have a system that can launch 10,000 drones at one time? So I don't know what the numbers are of 10,000 times 100,000, but you can see that the dollars quickly add up. Now, what Israel is doing through some of its contractors is they've developed a Iron Beam system. This operates on a laser. It essentially sends heat against the drone that's coming in, and it causes it to explode. The advantage of Iron Beam is that Iron Beam can be operated for about $2 to $4 per, not $2 to $4,000, not $100,000, but $2 to $4, the cost of electricity to shoot down an incoming missile or drone. Now, the problem with Iron Beam is it has a very limited range, but they're increasing the range, and it's now thought that this Iron Beam is going to be put in field service next year. That will be, in my view, a game changer, as long as they can build enough of these to put them around, because they have a functional limitation of about 4.8 miles, at least right now, based on the current technology. And when I was talking about this a year ago, it was a mile or less. So now they're up to about 4.8 miles, but they have to put them around. They have to be in the right place at the right time. So they're going to have a lot of these. But they can operate off electricity, and they're very, very effective. So now, next Sunday, or this week, on Friday, Saturday, you're going to see the start of a very important event in New York City, the beginning of the UN meeting. And the UN meeting of this year is going to have the Summit of the Future. That's going to be taking place on next Sunday and Monday. And they're talking about, we're going to have a pact for the future. They're going to have all this agreement. It's going to be to implement in a stronger sense the Sustainable Development Goals that the UN has been pursuing since 2015 or earlier, that they're supposed to be fully implemented by 2030. Everybody seems to be picking 2030. A lot of Bible prophecy guys are picking 2030, and the UN has been picking 2030, has announced 2030 for quite some time. I've read through some of the documents. They have drafts of this pact for the future. The most recent draft has about, 60 or 70 action points, things that they want to do to accomplish, to implement these. So we'll talk more about that in the next couple of weeks, but that's going to be taking place. There's sort of a action group seminar that takes place next Friday and Saturday, and then Sunday, Monday, they have the actual summit of the future. I think sort of related to this, this is an article from the Financial Times this week, that BlackRock and Fidelity, and now another big company, Janus, has announced that they're going to follow BlackRock and Fidelity into the tokenization of assets. This is to make all of everything in the world to be digitized in some way so that it has a value. The goal of this is to link everything together. Everything will be linked. Cryptocurrency, tokenization of assets, that type of thing. It would all be digital, electronic, and very easy for people to manage and take control of. So we'll talk more about that in the future too. I don't want to get too far into the weeds on that this week, but that's a very significant development that we see happening. Another significant development is we talk about the mark of the beast system, technology, how that's affecting warfare, finance, in those areas. We also have the world, sort of a developing world religion. Here is the Pope in Indonesia this week, and I believe he'll speak, and then there's a translation of what he had to say. And I'm not sure why that's not, hang on here. Yeah, I'm not sure why that's, well, I'll tell you what, I'll just talk about a little bit what he had to say. So,
una delle cose che più mi ha colpito di voi giovani, di questi qui, no? È la capacità del dialogo interreligioso.
One of the things that struck me about all of you here is your ability to engage in interreligious dialogue.
E questo è molto importante.
And this is very important.
Perché se voi incominciate a litigare, la mia religione è più importante della tua, la mia è la vera, la tua non è vera, dove ci porta questo?
Because if we start to fight amongst ourselves and saying, my religion is more important than yours, my religion is true, yours is not, where will that lead us?
Dove?
Where will it lead us?
Qualcuno risponda, dove?
Someone respond, where would it lead us?
Forte.
La distruzione.
E cosa così? E ci vuole litigare.
Yes, it's okay to discuss and to...
Tutte le religioni sono un cammino per arrivare a Dio.
Because every religion is a way to arrive at God.
Sono, dirò una comparazione, sono come diverse lingue, diversi idiomi per arrivare lì.
Sort of a comparison, an example would be they're sort of like different languages in order to arrive at God.
Ma Dio è Dio per tutti.
But God is God for all.
E come Dio è Dio per tutti, noi siamo tutti figli di Dio.
And if God is God for all, then we're all sons and daughters of God.
Ma il mio Dio è più importante del tuo.
But my God is more important than your God.
È vero quello?
Is that true?
C'è un solo Dio lì. E noi sono idiomi, cammino, lingue per arrivare a Dio.
There's only one God, and each of us is a language, so to speak, in order to arrive at God.
Qualcuno è schi, qualcuno è musulmano, qualcuno
Muslim,
hindi, qualcuno cristiano,
Hindu,
ma sono
Christian.
diversi cammini.
They're different paths.
Understood? Ma per il dialogo interreligioso fra i giovani ci vuole coraggio.
In order to have interreligious dialogue among young people, it takes courage.
So there you have it. I mean, all religions lead to God. All religions are the same. Well, they're sort of the same. They lead to the same God, but they maybe speak different languages. But your path is as valid as anybody else's. And this is what, I mean, we've talked for years here about the emerging church and some of the postmodern ideas that came out of that or that led to the development of the emerging church, or emergent church as some like to call it, where your truth is as valid as anybody else's truth. And that's just not true. You know, they would say things in the emergent church like, there's no such thing as absolute truth. Oh, do you mean that absolutely? That there's no truth? And you see it, and these guys are still around. I saw on MSNBC, my favorite coffee alternative, because it gets my adrenaline going. They had on Doug Pagitt. Doug Pagitt was one of the leaders of the emerging church. And you might remember he had a debate or had a discussion with John MacArthur on Larry King one night, I think it was. And Doug Pagitt came off as more of a Buddhist than a Christian. And he had a church, I can't remember what the name of it was, in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area. And he was not a Christian. He, Brian McLaren, and some others, I think I would include Rob Bell in that group, led this movement that your truth is as good as anybody else's truth. And it was interesting. And they were very political. I'm trying to remember the name. They used to have this Wild Goose Festival down in North Carolina. And it was a lot of political action things, how they're going to change things politically. And so there was Doug Pagitt on MSNBC this week criticizing some Christians for supporting political views that didn't agree with his. And saying it's just wrong to politicize the church, as they did exactly the same thing through everything that they did. So pay attention to that. You're going to see a lot of this over the next couple months as we get close to the election. Now I want to put in a new slide. There's been a lot of talk about Springfield, Ohio, and what's been going on in Springfield, Ohio. And this has been I would only term it a major gaslighting operation. That's taken place. So here's CNN, here's J.D. Vance, the senator from the state of Ohio, that's talking on CNN about what's going on in Springfield. And then, so they've brought a whole bunch of immigrants into Springfield, Ohio, mainly Haitian. By most estimates, Springfield is about 50,000 people. They brought in 20,000 Haitians. Now, nobody wants to force the Haitians to live in Haiti because Haiti is a very, very bad place. But when they come in, they bring a lot of problems with them. So I will see some Christians that will say, oh, well, you Christians, you're so self-righteous. You don't care about these poor people, and how that you're just a bunch of hypocrites that you don't want to take care of these poor people. But there's a lot of, and I don't even want to get into the allegations of dogs and cats being eaten for dinner and that type of thing, kidnapped and eaten for dinner. I don't know that that's relevant, but it's having a major impact on Springfield. There's somebody I think he's running for the state senate over there, posted a long post on Twitter the other day and said, listen, HIV is way up. It's straining our social services. We can't take care of people. mothers are having to have, the OBGYNs are all booked up because they're having to deliver babies because the mothers have HIV and they have to do cesarean sections. It's straining medical services. It's straining the hospitals. And I've talked to people over there, and it is a big problem. Springfield's not that big a town, and you don't bring 40% of the town's population in and just dump them there. There are people that are exploiting them and taking advantage of them. And so there's a lot of controversy. So Trump brought it up in the debate the other night, and immediately the news media going, oh, this is all a myth. There's nothing wrong. It's no problems. This is all made up. And what are they doing? They're gaslighting us, right? And this is what they do. So here's J.D. Vance, who's been castigated for what he has said on CNN the other night.
Dana, first of all, let me just respond to a couple of things that you said, but I want to start with something you said, which I think is frankly disgusting and is more appropriate for a Democratic propagandist than it is for an American journalist. There is nothing that I have said that has led to threats against these hospitals. These hospitals, the bomb threats and so forth, it's disgusting. The violence is disgusting. We condemn it. We condemn all violence.
Senator, this happened after you and President Trump were on the debate stage, said that cats and dogs were being eaten.
You asked a question, Dana, and I'm going to go ahead and answer it. What we have said is that this town has suffered terribly under the policies of Kamala Harris. Now, you just accused me of inciting violence against the community when all that I've done is surface the complaints of my constituents, people who are suffering because of Kamala Harris's policies. Are we not allowed to talk about these problems because some psychopaths are threatening violence? We can condemn the violence on the one hand, but also talk about the terrible consequences of Kamala Harris's open border on the other hand. Now, let me just fact check a couple of other things that you said, Dana, because it's important. You said that all of these migrants are in the country legally. They are in the country through what's called temporary protective status. Right. That is when Kamala Harris waved a magic amnesty wand, taking people and giving them legal status. That is not to say that they're here legally. That is a terrible indictment of her amnesty policies that have further opened the border and further caused terrible migration into this country.
No, they're given court dates on when they're supposed to appear, but those court dates, when there's to have a hearing on whether they can stay, are being set 7, 8, 9 years in the future. How many of them do you think are going to show up when that court date comes? There's also reports, and I think these are very credible reports based on my own personal investigation of this, that they're getting driver's licenses. The police are being strained in responding to traffic accidents and that type of thing. They're giving licenses. They don't speak English. So they're going to the license branch. They're given an interpreter when they get their exam, and the interpreter, I'm being told, is answering the questions for them, and therefore they pass and they get their driver's license. Listen, I use this example out in California. I'd flown out on my client's jet, and I had to get to Ohio State Airport when I flew back to Columbus International Airport. So I went down and got a cab. The cab driver, and I know this will, you can call me a racist if you want, he was Somalian. It was very clear he was Somalian. And as we were driving, this is in December, the window was fogging up. And I told him, dude, you need to turn on the defroster. So he started playing with the radio buttons, the volume button on the radio. So I told him, I said, dude, if you don't turn the defroster on, I'm going to make you pull over. I'm going to get in the driver's seat and go where I need to go, with or without you. This is not safe. So I finally pulled over and I finally showed him how to operate the defroster because, listen, he was a new immigrant. He came from a country where they didn't need a defroster because it's near the equator. So he had never had to use it. Now, he wasn't a bad driver. He just didn't know how to use a defroster so you could, do something that's important to driving in Ohio in the wintertime, like see out the windshield, right? We all want to be able to see out the windshield. So it's a real thing. in Springfield. And so this is what happened. This was the gaslighting that took place in the debate the other night. Kamala Harris claimed, by the way, she was never fact-checked, was she? Not once. Trump was fact-checked on everything he said. And now there's a whistleblower I hear coming out from ABC saying, yeah, this is what they did. They did it on purpose because Trump is so bad. But she said, well, crime rates are down. Crime rates are down. Just like this gal goes, well, these are not here illegally. Well, you changed the definition. And then what happened was the crime rates are down because they're not charging anybody with crimes. That's a pretty easy way to reduce the crime rate. So it reminds me of what happened out in California. And I was just spent some time in California. It was 120 degrees a couple days, and it was quite hot. But in California, what they did was that I remember a headline, I think it was in the Los Angeles Times, that said, crime rate declines in face of rising prison population. They couldn't figure out how that there was a connection between the two, that maybe the crime rate was going down because you had put all the criminals in jail, in prison, but they can't process facts. I'm sorry, they are constitutionally incapable of doing that. So there is this gaslighting that takes place. And over in Springfield, Ohio, what's happening is these immigrants, mainly from Haiti, are being charged with crimes. And guess what's happening? The charges are being dismissed. Why? Because they don't have enough interpreters available to have those people go to trial and get a fair trial. So they just dismiss the charges. That doesn't mean that there aren't crimes taking place. And people, so it's a massive problem over there. And I believe that that's probably Springfield. What's the county over there? Clark is probably the most pro-Trump county in the country. And guess what? A lot of people, there are reports, I'm just telling you, I've seen them all over the place, of people, you got a driver's license, you can vote. And and by the way, I saw a chart of where all these undocumented immigrants or whatever are going that have this category that Kamala Harris and the administration made up, and they're all going to red counties, by and large. So you can do the math of maybe what they're trying to do with what's coming up in early November. So by the way, I will be in California on Election Day, doing a prophecy update with Pastor Tom Hughes down at Calvary Chapel, the Harbor, with Pastor Joe Pettick down there. And then I'll also be doing a conference with some people later that week at 412 Church in Temecula called the End of the World Conference. So I don't think it's the last, I don't know, maybe it's the last conference we ever do. I don't know. So, but this is what's happening. And so this is an article by Jonathan Turley, excellent opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal the other day, talking about the left's assault on the Constitution. They don't care about the Constitution. They don't care about free speech. Let me give you an example of what's going on in Israel. In Israel, the Biden administration has put sanctions on people who live in Judea, Samaria. That would be called the West Bank. They live there. They're Jewish. They're Orthodox. One example, Carolyn Glick talked about this on our program the other day with a law professor who's actually brought a lawsuit here in the United States, and I cannot remember his name. But this mother of 8 she's been totally debanked. She can't do any financial transactions. She can't buy groceries. She can't pay her mortgage. She can't do anything because they have put sanctions on her. And the sanctions are strong enough that if anybody deals with her, they get sanctioned also. Well, this has impacted her husband. Her husband has also been debanked as a result. And the reason they're being debanked is because she had the audacity to protest giving aid to Hamas in Gaza. And there's stories all over the place today, over the past few days, about how Hamas is stealing all the aid that goes in there. They're putting it in warehouses, and then they're creating supply-demand issues. The price goes up, and Hamas makes a lot of money off of it, and it's a major problem on getting aid to people in Gaza. So she protested that. By the way, Hamas is a recognized, named, specifically named terror organization by the United States government, the one that the Biden administration claims to be running, other than into the ground, running it into the ground. So she's sanctioned. Her husband is sanctioned. Her husband is an American citizen. So the federal government is putting speech restrictions on American citizens. This is blatantly unconstitutional. These people are scoffing at the Constitution. It's so egregious, it's very concerning. So Jonathan Turley, who, by the way, professor at Georgetown or George Washington University Law School, is a man of the left. I would call him center left. But like Alan Dershowitz and some others, they have principles. They're what I would call classic liberals. They're not insane leftists. Okay, so there's a center left to insane leftist. Okay, so there's still a few over here, but they're all migrating over here to this other place. Elon Musk is facing this. There was I think an interview that Kamala Harris gave to somebody at CNN a couple years ago, and she said Elon Musk should be shut down. He should be censored. She works for the federal government. There is a First Amendment to the United States Constitution. The United States Constitution is what we would call the supreme law of the land. The supreme law of the land is not Kamala Harris. And what do? They will accuse you of doing everything that they do. So they'll go out there and they'll accuse Trump and Vance and everybody else that they don't agree with politically of doing this when they're when they're actually doing it. So that's sort of a fundamental principle of life. Sun comes up in the morning, they accuse you of doing what they're actually doing. So now I'm going to talk mostly about Israel, Middle East, geopolitics for the rest of the time. I have a couple clips. I'm probably going to play one of them and maybe part of another one because the one is about 14 minutes long. But I think it's a pretty important voice in the Middle East, and I think you need to hear what he has to say, and that's Dr. Mordecai Kadar. But we'll get to that in just a moment. So there's been all this back and forth about negotiating a deal to get the hostages out of Gaza. I just saw a report before I came in here that 3 hostages, it's believed, were now killed in an Israeli airstrike on Gaza back in November. There are about 100 hostages, but nobody has any idea how many are alive, if any. And this is terrible for their families. They don't know. They know that 30 or 40 of those hostages are dead, but they don't know which ones. They haven't released that. And so the families are left in this horrible position where they don't know whether their loved one is alive or not. And I'm very sympathetic to that. But this is a war. These people are monsters on the other side. And by the way, if you think I'm not being very nice or kind when I call Hamas monsters or subhuman or something like that, save your comment. You make a comment on our YouTube channel, you will be blocked. That's not an appropriate comment. I'm sorry. You wouldn't come in this church and you wouldn't last very long here if you were stand up in the middle of church and make that kind of comment. And I just don't have much tolerance for it anymore. So there's plenty of play. You can get a Twitter account and you can comment all you want there or whatever. But we try to maintain sort of a semblance of order on our YouTube and other comments. But here's Sinwar. So one of the things that Israel floated was, okay, listen, we'll enter into an agreement. You give us the hostages, but Sinwar has to leave. We'll give him safe passage to somewhere else. And I don't know how much Sinwar is worth. I know that Hanya, who was killed in Lebanon a month or so ago, he was a multi-billionaire. Other guys that are associated with Hamas are multi-billionaires. Mahmoud Abbas, who heads up the Palestinian Authority, he's a multi-hundred million dollar millionaire. And by the way, when he flies around on his own private $45 million jet. So he's not suffering. So Israel makes the proposal, we'll let Sinwar leave and we won't go after him. And he says no. So listen, take him at his word. He doesn't want to make a deal. So deal with him. Go in there and do what everybody says is eradicate him. And this is a big problem in Israel in that there's a lot of concern about how did they miss things on October 7th? How were they so negligent that things didn't happen? And my contention is, listen, I don't have any dispute that things were missed. People have started to resign from the IDF because I think the director of intelligence, I don't remember the exact title, resigned because they didn't pay attention to the warnings that they were getting from the observers down there. They dismissed it. And we know what happened. But the question is, I don't remember who it was I asked this, and I can't remember if it was in an interview, but if you're going to talk about what to do after October 7th, and you want to criticize people for missing October 7th, then you also, I think, need to ask the question, what should have been done before October 7th? So let's say everybody paid attention, everybody believed the warnings. How do you think the world would react to Israel if Israel had said, you know what we need to do is we need to go in there and level Gaza, like they've done over the last almost year? How do you think the world would have reacted to that? The world hates Israel now. I mean, just look around, look at social media, look at all the posts that are coming. Do you think it would have been better if they'd acted proactively before anything happened? I don't think so, but still they have to do that. They have to do this even though I will say nothing significant has happened in the north. In a sense, there's nobody been coming across the border, but a number of people have died. A couple dozen IDF soldiers at least have died, and 80,000 people don't live where they lived a year ago. And there's no indication or no promise as to when they're going to be able to go back. So Netanyahu at the Security Cabinet meeting yesterday did say, we've got to deal with the North. We've got to make it safe. We've got to deal with Hezbollah so that these people can return home. It's a big problem. Now, when Netanyahu gave a speech about a week ago where he was talking about the problems in Gaza and what they were doing and how they needed to control the Philadelphia corridor, that would be that line at the left side of the Gaza Strip. That's not an Israeli border. That's the border with Egypt. There are estimated over 200 tunnels under that border through which arms, well, I'll take that back, through which the IDF did a thing with the press this week, and they said, yeah, they've been sending material to build rockets across that border. But no arms, no machine guns or AK-47s or anything like that. Now, by the way, how many of you really believe that that's the case? You'll send rocket stuff across, but, well, Hamas is so concerned about how it would look politically that we won't send small arms across or RPGs or hand grenades or anything like that. Listen, I don't believe this for a minute. And part of what they're doing, like this week, there were pictures released of the tunnels in which the hostages, remember there was it 2 weeks ago? The 6 hostages were found dead in a tunnel, shot in the head. Their autopsies revealed. And they showed the pictures of those tunnels. They showed the blood-stained tunnels. Part of that, though, is a psychological operation. Israel wants to make sure everybody's informed, but when they inform everybody, they sort of help the terror psychological operation that Hamas is engaged in. Hamas does it, Hezbollah does it, Iran does it, and it's a very, very big problem. Okay, let me talk about this. So this is because Russia, Ukraine, Russian involvement, and all these things play together, I think. So there's a big meeting this week in St. Petersburg, Russia, on the BRICS. That's the BRICS, it's called BRICS 20, Russia 24 conference. And at the BRICS conference, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They have formed an organization, and part of what their stated organization goals, I think, is to change what is the world's reserve currency. Because right now, the world reserve currency is the US dollar, and because of that, the US gets a lot of advantage to that, and we're able to throw our weights around. Now, throw our weight around. Part of the problem, though, is when you are the world's reserve currency, there are certain things that you shouldn't do. Our government loves sanctions. And so what are they doing? They're putting sanctions on everybody in the world. They're putting sanctions on Jews who live in Israel because they don't like what they're saying. They put sanctions on Russia, put sanctions on other countries. And so what that does is that erodes people's confidence that this is the kind of currency that we want to do international trade in. The Saudis did not renew their agreement recently. It expired after about 50 years to purchase oil in U.S. currency, to do their oil transactions in U.S. dollars. Now, there's always been exceptions to that, and they haven't done everything in U.S. dollars all the way through, but now the BRICS are trying to say, okay, we're going to create a new reserve currency. And they brought a bunch of other countries in. They brought in, Iran has been brought into this. There's about 34 countries now that have been brought into the BRICS umbrella. The problem is they haven't been able to develop an alternative currency. I don't think that happens overnight. So you've seen things in the press, in the financial press, over the last year. The dollar's going away, next week. The dollar's going away in a month, 6 months, a year. The dollar, and I think eventually this happens, and it'll be like a lot of other things that happen in Bible prophecy and other things these days. It happens gradually, then suddenly. So we're in the gradual phase now. The problem is predicting when the suddenly happens, and it can happen very suddenly. But understand that Russia and China, they have agreement on a lot of things, but they don't get along on everything. Brazil used to have Bolsonaro as the president, and they're doing the same operations on him, lawfare and that type of thing in Brazil that they did on the former president here in the United States, and continue to do. How many of you think that November will come and there'll be a smooth transition to the next president in January of 2025? I don't see any hands out there. If you had raised your hand, we would ask you to stay over for further education. And I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not a prophet. And, who even knows whether there's going to be an election? It's still 6 weeks away, isn't it, about? So it'd be 15. So it's about 60 days away, I guess. No, it's not that, is it? 15 days left in September, 31 in March. That's 46. Oh, it'd be about 50 or 51 days. I don't, who knows what's going to happen in the next 51 days. So they had this meeting, and they were all talking about, we're going to get this reserve currency, we're going to get something going, we're going to do this. And in some respects, you could say it's just fluff, but on the other hand, I would not say that it's just fluff. They're making plans for a post-US dollar world. The question is, something has to replace it. So they've tried to come up with a gold-backed currency. But China says, no, we want the yuan. Because why? China's in huge financial problems, on the verge of financial collapse in many respects. China has a similar, from a government standpoint, they have the same problem in China that they do here in the United States. There's a lot of money, older people in China that have saved up a lot of money, just like there's a lot of older people here in the United States that have IRAs and 401ks and retirement accounts. And the government would really like to get their hands on that money. And it's the same way in China, but China really can't. It's just a problem. Turkey came in this week and they asked, this is from the Al Akbar newspaper, they've requested BRICS membership. And the question is Turkey further distancing itself from the West? Some people say that. My conclusion is Erdogan is playing every side to his own advantage. That's the way he operates. So Putin was at the meeting this week. He came and he gave a speech and met with these guys. And here's a little blurb. I think this comes from the national newspaper, United Arab Emirates. It's often said about BRICS that it doesn't have a clearly defined or unified goal. Only some members share a strategic vision to balance American influence around the world, while a few others are either in direct competition or have strong disagreements with one another. And there was I probably put it some way. There was also in the same Al Akbar newspaper that I just referenced, there was also an article that said Russia and Iran, while they have a lot of things in common, they're really at odds with each other on some things. So Iran tries to manage that by giving missiles, ballistic missiles to Russia, drones to Russia. Russia tries to do that, but one of the things that Iran is concerned about is there's this corridor that people want to develop, are trying to develop to go around Iran. And Russia and China are at odds there. I think Iran supports, I can't remember. I'll have to get my friend Nicole on the line and have her explain it to me again. But Armenia and Azerbaijan, there's supposed to be a trade corridor that goes through there. Iran is objecting to that because I think Iran supports, I don't remember who supports, somebody supports Azerbaijan, somebody supports Armenia. And there's a trade corridor and they're fighting over it, and that's a fight between Russia and Iran to some degree over that. So that's a problem. I'll mention this a little bit more related things lately, but here is the article from the Jerusalem Post. The Secretary General of the Arab World, Guterres. So he's going to be heading up this Summit of the Future this week. And what does he not do? He never criticizes Hamas. He never criticizes the Arabs. It's all Israel bad, Israel bad, Israel bad, Israel bad. The Palestinians are making a move to be seated at the UN. That's a bit of an unprecedented move. So this week, there was a lot of things. So, and there's no audio to this, by the way, or no audio because it's in Russian and you won't understand it either, but I do have a translation of what's said. So here is, so a media guy in Russia goes to St. Petersburg, catches Putin outside the meeting, and of course now this is not going to load. So he asked Putin, he goes, so what's going on? There's this problem with you and the West over giving missiles, long-range missiles to Ukraine. Putin essentially says this, listen, if NATO does that, we will consider that to be an act of war, and we will respond. And so there's this back and forth that's taking place on this particular issue. So it's amazing that this does not load on my... here we go. So here's what Putin said. The fact is, this is Putin, that I've mentioned this, and any expert both in our country and the West will confirm this. The Ukrainian army is not capable of using cutting-edge, high-precision, long-range systems supplied by the West. I don't know that that's true. Ukraine's been very innovative in the way they've been able to deal with the Russian army. They cannot do that, Putin says. These weapons are impossible to employ without intelligence data from satellites, which Ukraine does not have. And so Putin is essentially saying, listen, how dare Ukraine use resources from other countries to defend itself against us who invaded Ukraine? By the way, I am not a fan of Russia, okay? That doesn't mean I'm 100% in favor of everything that Ukraine has ever done. That's not the case. But there was one country that invaded the other here, and that was Russia. And so Russia is now saying, how dare Ukraine go to the West and get long-range missiles? Oh, but we're going to go down to Iran and get some more because we're running out, we're running low, we need help. That's okay. That seems to be a bit hypocritical to me. But that's, it's war, and war's not always a fair fight. So Putin says, he says this, therefore, it is not a question of allowing the Ukrainian regime to strike Russia with these weapons or not. It is about deciding whether NATO countries become directly involved in the military conflict or not. If this decision is made, it will be nothing short of direct involvement. It will mean that NATO countries, the United States, and European countries are parties to the war in Ukraine. This will mean that their direct involvement in the conflict and will clearly change the very essence, the very nature of the conflict dramatically. This will mean that NATO countries, the United States, and European countries are at war with Russia. And if this is the case, then bearing in mind the change in essence of the conduct, we will make appropriate decisions in response to the threats that will be posed to us. And so the question is, what's going to happen? Germany came out this week and said, we're not going to let Ukraine use long-range weapons that we've supplied. They have to be used defensively in the immediate area around Ukraine. You can't be sending a missile 900 miles into Russia to strike an oil refinery or something like that. The UK is taking a different approach. They've given you, it appears, the go-ahead. Prime Minister Starmer was told, go it alone and let Ukraine fire missiles. The Prime Minister was told. That's front page of the Times of London this morning. And so the question that becomes is, who's going to blink first? Is Putin going to use tactical nuclear weapons? Is there going to be a nuclear war? And then you're seeing all of these things appear on Twitter. For example, here is a graphic that somebody put together that says, well, Putin better be careful because within 2 hours, the West can completely destroy Russia. And that makes some assumptions. That assumes that all of the US, NATO, and other missiles work. Some of them haven't been tested for a long time. We don't know whether they're good. And so they show this graphic, and so you see here, this is what somebody that supports the countries against Russia says. This, look at the fatalities. And if you follow this all the way through to the end, you're going to see that these missiles will supposedly kill, I think it's 44 or 50 million Russians. Now, what's missing from this particular equation? Well, Russia's got missiles too that they can fire, and when the people in the West say, well, we can do all this in 2 hours, Russia says, that's fine. We can take care of all of this in 30 minutes. And they've been threatening nuclear war for a long time. Back at the Maldives dialogues about 2018, Putin gave a speech. That's where they unveiled their hypersonic missiles. More about hypersonic missile in just a moment. And the hypersonic missile was there, shown how it flew, and then it split into like 6 or 8 warheads and went into Florida, where President Trump resided at the time for his main home. outside the White House. But what they don't show is that Russia can respond. And by the way, Putin in another discussion group said, well, listen, you know, if we feel threatened, we don't have a first strike policy. I think that's changed a little bit. But if we feel threatened, we will make a first strike with nuclear weapons, and you'll go to hell and we'll go to heaven, or paradise. That's what he said. Because Russia views a lot of this as a religious war. I would highly recommend you go to RAIR Foundation, R-A-I-R, Foundation. About a month ago, Trevor Loudon, I think he's from New Zealand. He's done a lot of work on the Red-Green Alliance, did a talk about how Russian propaganda ideology that's promulgated by a guy named Alexander Dugin, often referred to as Putin's brain, and who's been praised by guys like Tucker Carlson and that type of thing, have pushed a lot of anti-Russian or pro-Russian propaganda into the right wing of the United States. And it carries with it a lot of anti-Semitism. And you can see that happening. I don't know what's wrong with Tucker. He does this interview with this guy who claims to be an historian, that he has an internet channel. But nobody shows what Russia can do in response. And here's Putin a few years ago, or a few months ago, talking about stop creating an image of an enemy out of Russia. It only hurts you. You've thought up that Russia wants to attack NATO. Have you gone completely crazy, stupid? Indeed, like this table. Who came up with this? It's a nonsense, but it would be nonsense if there wasn't an idea to fool your own population saying, help us, soon Russia will attack us and we need to arm ourselves. And you know, he's correct on that. So that's a big issue, what's going to happen with Russia. Some people think we're on the brink of nuclear war. And they could very well be right. Okay? Last I checked, it's a distinct possibility. And it could be very soon. It could be before the next election, if people keep, in some respects, provoking Putin. He has his own agenda, though. And like I said, he's the one who's been saying this for a long time. Okay, this is another sort of Russia-related. Sudan, which is located, let me get my laser pointer here, right here in the middle. They're in a massive civil war. Millions of people are on the verge of starving to death. Hundreds of thousands have been killed. And when we talk about the numbers that have been killed, they're Muslim Arabs, Arabs fighting Arabs. There's some ethnic things involved there as well. But who are the big two that are pushing in there to take control of things? There's three countries trying to get their influence in there, because Sudan has oil, it has access to ports on the Red Sea, which are strategically important. It's Russia, it's Iran, it's Turkey. And Sudan is mentioned in Ezekiel 38. I don't think we're on the verge of Ezekiel 38, by the way, but 38, 39. But I think it's coming at some point. And so you're seeing sort of an alignment of nations. And by the way, Egypt right now is in an alliance with Somalia against Ethiopia, because Ethiopia is trying to go through, no, Egypt's with somebody down there. And Ethiopia went to one of the warlords in Somalia and said, hey, we need a path to the ocean. So we'll go through the territory that you control. Well, that's Somalia, and that guy's not the leader of Somalia. So now Egypt gets involved and say, no, we don't want to do that, because they got a beef against Ethiopia over what? The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, GERD, as we said. Egypt's afraid that it's going to take water away from the Nile. Without the Nile River, Egypt dies. millions and millions of people died. 97% of Egypt lives within a few miles of the Nile River. And it's a population of 90 million people. A large army. But by the way, Al-Sisi, the leader who came against the Muslim Brotherhood, they're very fragile. They're not getting the revenue from the Suez Canal. That's about 20% of their government revenues. That's dropped off a cliff. So they built a big new capital city. I don't know if it's called New Cairo or whatever. Because what do you do when you're short of money? You go build a new capital city, right? And put all the infrastructure in place. El-Sisi's family is getting money from the trade and traffic of materials and goods and weapons and that type of thing across that Philadelphia corridor. That's why Egypt doesn't want to do anything about it. By the way, Egypt, how many Arab countries have stepped up and say, listen, we know these Palestinians, we'll call them Palestinians in Gaza, need someplace to live, we'll take them in. How many of them have stepped up to do that? The answer is, let's see, let me count. 0. Nobody's doing it. So that's a big problem. Jonathan Spire has a great article on Jerusalem Post on Friday. I won't go into that. This article is about some of the things going on in Lebanon. This one is, I know what it's talking about. The threat of Iranian using the Jordanian-Israel border to traffic weapons across into the West Bank, Judea and Samaria. It is a huge problem. I don't know what happened to these things. I know you're going to say, John's slides are out of order? Well, that's never happened before. Turkey's trying to get involved here. Erdogan came out this week calling for an alliance against Israel. Islamic Arab alliance against Israel. Arab League leader came out and said, yeah, we all need to unite against Israel. And then look at some of the imagery that we use. Here's Erdogan's tweet talking about this. In the words of the late Nuri Padiki, half of our heart is Mecca, the rest is Medina, with Jerusalem like a veil on top. There never was a night journey by Muhammad from the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. It is a made-up lie. But it's used. But the doctrine, the Islamic doctrine is, well, once we possess something, it's ours forever. So we were the Ottoman Empire, we're Muslim, we're in charge of Jerusalem, therefore we're always going to be or should be in charge of Jerusalem. So Seth Frantzman has a good article at Jerusalem Post about that. But look at some of these tweets. These are tweets from Turkish accounts under Erdogan's statement about what he wants to do about this Islamic alliance with Arabs and Turks. And so what do you see here? The picture are soldiers with the Turkish flag in front of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. By the way, you will never see Israeli soldiers with IDF soldiers with a Israeli flag in front of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. But it's okay for Turkey to provoke things like this. Here's another one. Be hopeful. In this future revolution, the loudest voice will be the voice of Islam. Here's another one. This one says, we have a dream. Jerusalem is our red line. And so look at the image that's there. Erdogan was citing his this article in Daily Sabah. Is it even possible? And the answer is, it is possible because they unite through the religion against Israel and the Jews. And then this is Erdogan's tweet this morning. Apparently, this is the prophet's birthday, Prophet Muhammad. And so this is Erdogan. And look at what he does. He tweets a thing, but what does he use as the image? He uses an image of the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, the largest church ever built in Christendom, that's now been turned into a mosque. You see the Islamic statements that are there, signs that are there. So this is a very significant thing. Israel tourism is way down. I've talked to some people this week. They don't think it will ever recover, ever. That's a shame. Half of startups and investments in Israel have been canceled due to this war. Muslim Brotherhood won in the Jordanian election. I think I mentioned that earlier. Now, there's some propaganda so here's a top Israeli military official. I think he's with what's called Unit 8200's intelligence gathering. And so Hezbollah's taken this and they're putting out this propaganda. They're saying, listen, this is Unit 8200's base in the Galilee region of Israel in the north. And what we've done is we attacked that. We attacked that with our missiles in a great operation in response to the killing of Shakur, the number 2 guy in Hezbollah. And so we've taken our vengeance out and we killed, they say, 22 IDF soldiers or 22 personnel at that base in northern Israel. Now, I've talked to people in Israel. They're not aware of that. But this is Hezbollah propaganda that they did this. And the implication in Nasrallah's speech that he gave, and you can find this at Al-Manar, ALMANAR, that's the Hezbollah media website. Open it in Chrome, and it'll be very easy for you to get an English translation. What I believe Nasrallah was saying here is, listen, all you people think we need to respond to what Israel did and the attacks and the killing of Hania and the killing of Shakur and Beirut. We've done it. We've done it. We've taken our vengeance, and so life will go on. But now, as I'm looking, I have this app called Zofar, Tzofar, like shofar, like the sound of a trumpet, the warning trumpet. It's been going off like crazy. Here. So what happened this morning was this. So Israel did a major operation the other day. They sent a missile into Syria, or they attacked a base in Syria, an Iranian operation where they manufactured missiles and other things. It's near, here it is. No, that's this morning. It was near Hama and the northwest part of Syria up near Aleppo. The word also is that Israel sent in commando teams to really destroy the facility, gather intelligence, and take some prisoners of war. Now, there's not been a lot of information given about this by the IDF. It appears that it's happened. But then this morning, I woke up and, here it is. That's a bunch of cruise missiles sent into Hama, attacked this, followed by Israeli on-the-ground commandos. This is the word that I'm getting. This morning, I woke up and my Zofar app, maybe it was buzzing and it woke me up, I don't know. I woke up literally a minute or two after this started to hit, about 12:54 a.m. here in Ohio. And what you see here, do you see see all those things right there? Those are, when you get a warning on the Zofar app, it will show you exactly what area, where the warning is pinpointed. And so those people need to go to bomb shelters. So what happened this morning was that the Houthis in down on the Red Sea, they launched a missile at Israel. I have a graphic. I just had it up. Where did it go? Boy, I'm even further behind than I thought. I did have it up just a minute ago, didn't I? 1,300 miles. Okay, so the missile, here it is. So a missile launched from the Houthis in Yemen flies 1,300 miles. Houthi claims it flew 1,300 miles in 11 minutes. that would, if you do the math, that's pretty far, pretty fast. Mach 5 or above is a hypersonic missile. So the Houthis come out and say that was a hypersonic missile. Some believe it was a version of this Iranian missile. The Houthis came out, they released a statement, and they said, we did this, this is our statement, this is a great victory for us. Now, the belief is Netanyahu came out and said, you Houthis, you need to remember who you're dealing with. And remember the port that we just bombed and blew up and that you're not going to be able to use for at least a year because of what we did? We will reach out and we will do this to you again. You need to be careful. And what happened, though, was that the missile came in, and the belief is that the missile, it fragmented in the air. And so when it fragmented in the air, and I got this from people in Judea, Samaria, in Jerusalem, elsewhere, they're saying, look at what's happening, all these attacks, hundreds, like dozens and dozens of attacks. But it appears that when the missile broke apart, everybody got warned. It did hit like near a power plant, caused some problems. There was a fragment that ended up in a train station at the escalator from the lower level up to the top. There was a place near a power plant where there was something on fire. Now, that could have been a missile shot to knock it down that missed. The initial indications are that Israel did not shoot it down. It broke apart in the air. When it broke apart, all those pieces, they picked it up as a warning. And so the Houthis are going, look at what we did. We made 2 million people go to bomb shelters, an unprecedented number. And if you remember, this is their goal. That's on the poster in Tehran that I've talked about many times. Are you ready for 2 million displaced people? So they said, in the area of Tel Aviv, and else, we sent 2 million people to bomb shelters with one missile. Look at how great and powerful we are. And that's a big propaganda victory for them. Now, it didn't accomplish anything, but it's a problem. So here's the guy from the Houthis, and he says this. Statement of the Yemeni Armed Forces regarding the implementation of a qualitative military operation targeting the depth of the Zionist entity with a new hypersonic ballistic missile that targeted an important military target in occupied Jaffa, Tel Aviv, Yafo, port of Joppa, that you remember, that's where Peter left. Now, it didn't hit anything of strategic significance, but it did get to Israel. And I will see that I'm sort of up against my limit. And we have some other things we have to do today, like eat lunch. So I will try to do a midweek update this week. I am working some, but I'll put it in. I want to play for you. If you don't want to wait, go to the IDSF, Israeli Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. I'll try later to amend the show notes to put the link to the interview that my friend Moshe Davis did with Dr. Mordecai Kadar, who's one of the leading Islamic, Arabic culture, tribal culture experts in the Middle East, probably without peer. It's about 27 minutes. You can listen to it. He talked the other day. And what he was talking about was, how are the Arabs reacting to how Israel's responding? And he said, there's a couple reactions. Some are scared because of how Israel's responded, and the others are like, okay, fight is on, game is on. And he also talked a little bit at the end about he thinks that Iranian society is very fragile. Let me finish with this. Look, all of this ends up, I used this at the conference in California, and I'll close up with this. I promise I will close up with this, I think, after I do this. Last week in the Jerusalem Post, their Jerusalem Post magazine, published last Friday or Sunday, had this cover story: Riyadh, Jerusalem normalization. And what does the headline say here? Peace with Saudi Arabia is inevitable. Remember, this is a big deal. But all of this revolves around Jerusalem. So a few years ago, my nephew contacted me. He was in seminary. I think I can cite him. And he said, hey, Uncle John, this was kind of interesting. This came up. This was, I think, a class he was taking that was sort of I don't know what they call it, cross-pollinated between Gordon Conwell Seminary, where he was, and Boston University. It was a missions class, or world missions or something. And I think he was taking it at Boston University. I said, look at this graphic. What do you see? Well, the professor at Gordon Conwell who wrote on this, it was called the Statistical Center of Christianity. So what they do is they take all the people in the world that claim to be Christians, and where's the statistical center of that thing? So you can see in 33 AD, Christianity was centered where? Where it started, in Jerusalem. And then as it went out, Judea, Samaria, and the uttermost parts of the earth in the Roman Empire, you can see that the center of Christianity went up into Europe. And so about 1500, 1600, 1800, it's centered around Italy in southern Europe. That's interesting. But as the church has moved into what we would call the 1040 window and missions, the center of the church has moved south, went to Spain about 1900, down into Africa about 1970, and it continues down into Africa. But what do you see that's happening here? This is what I saw as somebody who studies Bible prophecy. The church started in Jerusalem, and the center of the church is headed back to Jerusalem. When Mashiach comes and rules and reigns from Jerusalem, that will be the center of Christianity again. What is it that our friend Jacob says? The first Christians were Jews, the last Christians will be Jews. And so when I saw that, I got chills, because I thought this was sort of, now they say 2100, all of these things you see, it's gradual movement, and now it's sort of suddenly going to be back in Jerusalem, the center of Christianity. Because Jesus said, I'm returning to Jerusalem. Go read Zechariah chapter 8. Again, the word of the Lord of hosts came to me. Thus says the Lord of hosts, I was jealous for Zion with great jealousy, and I was jealous for her with great fury. Then saith the Lord, I am returned unto Zion and will dwell in the midst of Jerusalem, and Jerusalem shall be called a city of truth, and the mountain of the Lord of hosts, the holy mountain. Go read the whole chapter of Zechariah chapter 8. Read Zechariah 12, read Zechariah 14, because this city called Jerusalem, this is going to be at the epicenter of everything as we move forward. It's prophetic. So the church started in Jerusalem. It's coming back when Mashiach comes. And we look forward to that day. So plenty to, pray for me. I'm trying to schedule some interviews. There's a lot of people to talk to, a lot of people with some good knowledge. And I hope to be doing that over the next month or so. Okay, so let's pray, and we'll pick up again when I do my next update. No promises, but I'll try. Lord, we look forward to the return of Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Messiah, to rule and reign in Jerusalem. Lord, help us to do our part to prepare our hearts and the world for that inevitability. Bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.